Madhuram Madhuram Bhadanam Madhuram Ayanam Madhuram Asitam Madhuram Hidayam Madhuram Gamanam Madhuram Madhura Vipate Rakilam Achanam Madhuram Charitam Madhuram Vasanam Madhuram Valitam Madhuram Charitam Madhuram Ramitam Madhuram Madhura Dipate Rakilam Renur Madhura
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Svagatam. Welcome back to our second half of our class, number 3, on the Advaita of the avatars. Necessarily, we've been showing the main reason, one of 3 or 4 main reasons that Krishna cites in the Bhagavad Gita for the avatar's descent. And that is to restore the Dharma, to help people use the Dharma to gain enlightenment. They're also to help the suffering and the lowly ones, as I said earlier in class. And these are some of the main reasons why an avatar would make the great yagya, make the great sacrifice of coming out from formless bliss and peace and contentment and freedom, and enter into the realm of name and form with us, so that we would have a grand exemplar for how to get free. Swami Vivekananda probably being the best example of that in our recent times. So we looked necessarily then at stages of gaining enlightenment, which also included, in a very unique look, stages of ignorance. Not treated very often in circles, that you get a teaching on ignorance in stages. It's pretty much just massed together as Maya or Avidya or Samsara, those words. But to see how a person grows out of ignorance and begins to put childish things behind them and mature, even up to the intellectual stages we were seeing in this recent chart, and then finds religion, as they say, and then finally gets spiritually awakened. The Kundalini becomes involved at that point. Sri Ramakrishna himself made a statement about Kundalini Shakti, that no spiritual growth or awakening will happen without it. So the Kundalini system has to be placed in a genre of pathways that's of the highest and most immediate import to us. That's why I've just finished a book called Reclaiming Kundalini Yoga, and have put it out in a very concentrated but easy to understand form, with some charts like these, some visuals to help the aspirant understand what Kundalini Shakti is, because you must get this energy awakened and traveling upwards, that means inwards, in order to have access to these higher levels of knowledge and wisdom, and even the end of wisdom in truth, as Krishna says in the Gita. So it would be, that's one side of the coin we're looking at in this teaching. The other side is the nature of an avatar. What's that being like not just what his teachings are like, but what is the actual soul like. And that's why I've put this up for you to see, this 5 ways to perfection, according to Sri Ramakrishna. He mentions all these in the Gita, and in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. And I've just pulled them together with certain quotes from him so that we can see them all on one page instead of 1,000 pages, which the Gospel is more than 1,000 pages long. So if we can see teachings like that gathered on one page, it gives us an example and a good definition of that word siddha, which can run the gamut of meanings. It can mean things associated with hemp smoking. It can be a person of a very low caliber of attainment. A siddha is considered, the siddhas and the munis are considered very low level of attainment, spiritual beings. Siddha can also mean an occult power one goes after, like the Astabala siddhas, levitation and those kinds of things, which are considered by most avatars to be, well, to quote Ramakrishna, crow droppings by the side of the road and not useful for your spiritual life. And siddha can also mean perfect. And that's the way we're going to use that word here. That Sanskrit word defined here is perfect soul. Like we talked about Vivekananda just before the break, he was a Nitya Siddha, Ramakrishna called him, an eternally perfect soul. So here is these 5 mentions of different kinds of siddha, or siddhas, that people, the spiritual realm, some of them we see walking around on the world from time to time. First of all, his quote here, "One can gain spiritual perfection through both affirmation and negation. Blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God." I really could have used this chart for the series we just finished with that quote in tow, meaning the devotion of non-separation, because he's talking the path of neti neti is negation, and the path of iti iti is of affirmation. So he's saying one can gain spiritual perfection, not just advancement, but perfection, by putting together the paths of affirmation and negation. This is what the Ramakrishna devotees have been doing ever since he brought that synthesis to earth. And what Swami Vivekananda exemplifies when he appears is this beautiful integration of yogas like that. So to explain it more, the master said, "Blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God." This is the all-inclusive path of positive love and devotion commingled with transcendent knowledge. Probably the only thing you would add to that is meditation. After you have this commingling of the 2 wings of the bird, which my teacher was always talking about, bhakti and jnanam, then just sit and meditate on that over time. And this distilling of these 3 yogas will purify the 4th yoga, karma, action. So you're doing devotion, you're doing devout action, aren't you? You're doing pujas, you're doing chanting, you're doing things of an active nature in the spirit. Then on the other side you have wisdom, which is discriminating wisdom, and that's trimming away all the ignorance away from your knowledge base, purifying the intellect and so forth. Then you meditate on the result of those 2, and your path of action becomes naturally purified. And everywhere you go, you see God in everything, even in the sinners, saint and sinner alike. You see nothing but Brahman there, in nature and in people. You see that one underlying reality. So that's a description of synthesizing the 4 yogas, and I'm adding to this particular quote by adding in meditation on that, and the natural outcome of pure action that comes from it. It's an all-inclusive path, he says. Now, these 5 ways, you can see the first one there that we talked about, that Ramakrishna called Vivekananda Nitya Siddha. His quote is, that is Ramakrishna's quote, "A class apart, he nevertheless practices disciplines after realization. He is similar to the gourd or the pumpkin vine, first fruit, then flower." It's a very nice analogy Ramakrishna used. You watch the pumpkin plant and you see fruit comes first and the flower comes afterwards. So he's saying that first comes perfection, then he practices disciplines, and the flowers happen. So he's one of those rare cases, unlike almost all the rest of us, who enter into spiritual practice so that we perfect ourselves. He's already perfect, and then he enters into spiritual practice. See? So it's a very unique soul that can do that and does do that, and of course will do it as an example to others, like Ramakrishna taking teachers I was mentioning in the first half of the class. So that's the Nityasiddha, first fruit, and then flower. Interesting analogy he makes. Now, right on down, there's also the being called the Sadhana Siddha. Remember I mentioned in the Uddhava Gita, Sri Krishna telling his disciple Uddhava that sometimes it is that certain souls will gain their illumination by their own effort. That's sadhana. Those are also rare souls. Most are waiting for grace, Kripa Siddha, or they're waiting for it to come out of nowhere, Hatat Siddha, or they're maybe in a dream or through initiation or something. These are how they're depending on getting their perfection. But the Sadhana Siddha is unique in that way. Let's see his quote. Through austerity, japa, meditation, and study, this rare class of beings realize God through the practice of spiritual disciplines. So that's always held at a very high level of admiration by the seers. They like those beings who can get realization on their own steam. In a sense, it's like saying, why bother God for every little thing? You see? Oh, please, God, save me. Save yourself. Or you could say it this way, you could say, please, God, give me the will to do spiritual practice. I've heard that said before by devotees. Because I can't even drum up the ability to do practice, you see, but I want to do practice. Sound familiar to some of you? I really wish I was a great practitioner, but I'm a legend in my own dreams, but not in actuality. So if I were to somehow acquire that urge to do sadhana, that's a good prayer. But you don't want to depend too much on the avatar. Like sometimes we say, the avatar should really be a doorway. It should not be a doormat. So my teacher put that in a slightly more enlightening way, in a more refined way, by saying, in the West, the avatar is called a savior. But on the Eastern horizon, an avatar is called an exemplar. Now that's a beautiful saying. That's an Advaita Vedanta Zen koan. Something to contemplate. In the West, we call him a savior when he comes, avatar. But on the Eastern horizon, he's always been called an exemplar. You get the distinction, I hope. You're supposed to follow the avatar and be like thy Father is in heaven, perfect, as he said. But a savior means you have to depend on salvation. When the non-dual teachings are telling you that you're already free, that ignorance and evil and those kinds of things are not real. So this is the help you get by bringing in the Vedanta into these religious peripheries. Remember this, the chart, right? You got to religion first, and then you got spiritually awakened. That is, you got your intellect well wedded in the world, on the sandstone of the world, you see. And then you got religion. So in that religious context, you were thinking about salvation. Oh, I got to get to heaven. But that all ended when you got spiritually awakened. You found out that there's something called liberation. And you found out that heaven wasn't the greatest thing, wasn't the ultimate goal. And the lives of Buddha and Krishna and Ramakrishna proved that to you when you looked at them. Probably the lifetime of Christ also proved that to you, because I and my Father are one proved that there was something higher than heaven. Unless you were to define heaven as non-duality, then I have no problem with it. But if you define heaven as the realm of your ancestors, I have a problem with it. That's where all problems are. Rebirth being the first one. So it depends on how you define the terms, of course. But back to this idea of religion, when you're spiritually awakened, you're thinking in terms of dharma, not morality. And when you become a practitioner, you're thinking in terms of sadhana instead of dharma. You take them up one at a time, morality to dharma to sadhana to becoming an adept. When you're a spiritual adept, pretty much your ignorance is on the way out. You'll not see it again. So you've reached a divine status. Tantra calls that pasu, virya, and daiva. That's the triput you get in Tantra. That is, pasu means animalistic. Funny that it's on this chart too. Pasu means the animalistic soul who's still attached to nature and matter, and is very ignorant and very attached to outer things. Virya means heroic. So this is a soul Krishna describes as he wants to help all other souls. He's found the energy and become heroic. We shall become heroes. You know where that comes from. We shall crush the stars to atoms. We will unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We're the children of Sri Ramakrishna. And then later on it says that other phrase comes in and is used. So that kind of heroicness, we shall become heroes and have no more of ignorance, is a part of that poem he wrote. So that's the virya state. But from virya, heroic, you go to divine, daiva, or divya. And the divine status means a spiritual adept who is fully manned with all the methods and is able to not only has already put his own ignorance to the run, but can now help you put yours to the run too. Just watch it go away quick if you stay in the company of a Lex Hixon or a person who is well advanced in their spiritual life. If you have such a person like that in your life, then your ignorance can't really survive. You can almost laugh it away in the company of some beings. They're so naturally marvelous. Like the adage is, darkness cannot exist around the sun. Far, far away from the sun, maybe darkness is there, but if you get close to the sun, its days are numbered. It's over. So that's what you feel like in the presence of a great soul like that. And much, much, much more so, a billion suns in the case of an avatar. So a sadhana siddha is qualifying himself for jivan mukta and for videha mukta. They're practicing sadhana with a intention of refining their awareness to the nth degree, and then proving all of those beautiful adages. I and my Father are one, tat tvamasi, aham brahmasmi, all those beautiful sayings in different traditions that have to do with non-duality. There's actually a beautiful song. I haven't sung any of the songs because of the teachings are so powerful in this series of classes, but there's a song that Tulsidas wrote, where he mentions this exact thing. He says, Itani vinati raghunandan se dukha dandva hamara bitauji. Itani vinati raghunandan se dukha dandva hamara bitauji. 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 Itani vinati raghunandan se. This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunandan. So, Tulsidas, one of the most well-known of all Indian songwriters and poets, who even made the bridge into the West, some of his songs very well known here, sings this song. He says, "O Lord, this is my prayer to thee." He's praying to one of the avatars, Raghunanda, which means Sri Ramchandra. It's called Raghunanda. And so he's praying to the avatar. He says, "This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality." What an odd prayer, you see. I mean, you're waiting for the prayer to come from this devotee, give me lands, give me wealth, give me spiritual enlightenment. But he says, just take away my mind's tendency to perceive duality. He's very clever, you see, in a good way. And he goes on and says, because that will remove all my sorrows and sufferings. Why? Because Atman alone abides. He's already come to certitude, right, of non-duality. He's already reached a high state of wisdom. Jnana Bhumika. Only Atman abides. Nothing else exists. So he already knows this, so he wants that the Lord to fulfill his prayer by making him completely non-dual in all his perspective. In other words, to see God in everything. So these teachings, the poems, the songs, the teachers themselves, all integrated nicely, you see, in Siddha, in a kind of perfection that never breached imperfection. See, it's not the kind of perfection that, I was once imperfect, now I can get perfect. It was an eternal perfection that always was. I just wandered away from it for a while, if you will. I dreamed myself into ignorance. Silly me, you see. Silly me. So songs like that come to mind when you talk about profound lyrics or profound teachings. Who would put a song like that, a teaching like that in lyrics? You see. Just take away my mind's penchant to perceive duality. That's all I ask. That's my prayer to the avatar, you see. Well, the sadhana siddha is probably not praying for that. He's just doing it. He says, I'm going to, if Lord won't answer my prayer, I'm going to take away my mind's penchant to see duality under my own steam. Thank you very much. You see, here I go. There was that beautiful story of a man heard that if he emptied the ocean with a feather, Divine Mother would give him enlightenment. So he said, that's the way for me. So he went to the ocean side with a feather and he started taking out doles of the ocean, and he sat there for 2 or 3 days doing that. Somebody came by and said, you know, this is going to take you forever. He said, but enlightenment, I've got enlightenment state. So he went on doing it because he was completely, convinced in his mind. So after 3 or 4 more days, Mother appeared to him and said, okay, you can give that up now. I'll give you enlightenment. She gave him enlightenment. Well, that's called Kripa Siddha. Let's look at it. Perfection through grace. Ramakrishna says, and remember, these are direct quotes out of the Gospel of Ramakrishna, a spiritual manuscript that everyone should read. It's incomparable in this day and age as a testament, not only to the avatar's path, but to the immense mass of wisdom, teachings, and devotional practices, and universality of religions that are contained within the Gospel of Ramakrishna, an amazing testament, spiritually speaking. So he says, like a room kept dark for countless years and illumined when a bright lamp is finally introduced, these good souls get liberation through God's own sweet grace. Wouldn't you like to be one of them? My teaching on it, and it's influenced by Sri Ramakrishna's other teachings, is that really these two cannot be separated. The person whose room is kept dark for 1,000 years is really doing sadhana all that time, and they earn their grace through sadhana. It may look like the two are different, but it's quite often the case that this is dependent on these other 4. So it's not like a person is sitting there doing nothing, completely pig ignorant, and then all of a sudden he gets grace. In case you're thinking that. Thief in the night kind of style, you see. No, that would make the karma law untrue. That would make all these hundreds and thousands of souls in samsara all of a sudden recipients for grace undeserved. And that happens. God will all of a sudden enlighten an evil person for a purpose in front of everyone to see. God his own purposes, as I say. works in strange ways, his miracles to behold, and that kind of thing. Sure, that's all possible, but basically speaking, you'll find that this is pretty much dependent on all these. Let's look at the others. Hatat Siddha, Ramakrishna says about it, free all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, like a poor boy who, befriended by a rich man, is married to his daughter and given home and wealth. The master's sense of humor comes out there. I'm sure he said that with a laugh. The poor boy, he probably saw it happen. That a rich man gets a rich man as a friend, and all of a sudden he's in tight with his daughter, you see, and then gets married and gets all the wealth. And so that's Hatat Siddha. You get all this wealth of spiritual enlightenment all of a sudden for no reason. Hatat means suddenly, I think. So it's like sudden illumination for no apparent reason. But like I said, there are reasons hidden for that happening. This is a fun chart, isn't it? I'm having fun. I hope you are. Now, Swapna Siddha, if you recognize the word over here, Jagrat Swapna, Swapna, Swapna Jagrat, how the waking and dreaming state turn around on each other in this march out of ignorance. The same word appears here now, Swapna Siddha. Swapna means sleep, dreaming. So you get illumination in a dream. There are many people that come and ask me, Sufis, Buddhists, Muslims, what does your tradition say about the importance of dreams? So we used to be a little hard put to say anything. Well, the only thing you say is, from dreams awake, from bonds be free, That's the Upanishad's way of stating it. We don't believe in dreams. We believe in waking from a dream. This is all a dream. Dream number 1 is here, and dream number 2 is when you dream tonight. You want free of all dreams, so just wake up. But it's sort of, cast by the wayside, dream used as an indicator, a pointer. There are some dreams, in other words, that are very profound, that can point you in the right direction or get you off the wrong path and back on the right path. And then there are some dreams that can do exactly the opposite. So dreams are a mixed bag, no doubt. But the dreams that come from that level, just coming out of deep sleep, tend to be very visionary. You'll see, divine beings with big long beards and things like that, and robes walking around with staffs. You'll have visions of Muhammad or Moses or whoever you worship, will come to you. And if you remember those when you wake up, sometimes it is hard to remember them because you dream after that. And it takes away the original profound dream and replaces it with all these other layers of dreams, so you don't remember that. So that's why they have you meditate as soon as you get up in the morning. They don't even want you to wash your hands and face. If you can just sit up, don't do it in bed because they don't want you to meditate in bed. Get off your bed, get over to your asana, which is a meditation seat, and go right into meditation and think about what you just experienced in your inner consciousness. And that's the best chance you have of remembering that profound dream that is buried under all those other dreams. Because usually you'll leave your bed and you'll walk around and say, I remember I had a dream. You'll tell a friend you had a dream. And then that'll remember, that was connected to another dream. So it's kind of coming back to you after the fact. But the original dream you had that started out the sequence of cause and effect of dreams has been buried behind all those connections. And if you don't get up when it's fresh and get on the trail, you're tracking that dream back inside of yourself, then you won't uncover that powerful dream again. Sometimes there's a very powerful dream that shines through all your other dreams, no matter what. You'll wake up stunned by it. Now that's marvelous. I cannot deny that happened to me. And you don't go off and tell other people about it because they're going to say, it was just a dream, and then all of a sudden you start thinking, it wasn't important after all, was it, you see? So you keep it to yourself and quiet, or maybe share it with your teacher. But there are some dreams that happen to you in life that are very profound. So a little bit about that Swapna Siddha. Let's see what he says about it. Perfect in a dream. There is another class of devotees who, very fortunate and deserving, in a profound state of dream, get the vision of God and are set free. There are several cases in Holy Mother's life, Sri Sharada Devi. And so she was in the train station in Calcutta in one of these stories that we've heard her say. It's been written down. And a man came up to her and said, "You're my Janaki." Janaki means Sita, Ram's beloved. "I saw you in a dream." So this obviously was a devotee of Ram and Sita. He says, "You're my Janaki. I saw you in a dream. You gave me a mantra in a dream." So Holy Mother said, it was a crowded, noisy train station. So she took him aside in a quiet corner, evidently, and said, "Now tell me what you dreamed and tell me the mantra I gave you." And so he told her the dream and told her the mantra, and she corrected it. She said, "Well, you didn't come out of the dream with the exact pronunciation, but you did fairly well. But here, let me tell you what the mantra really should be." And she corrected that mantra and sent him on his way. An instance of a person who met their guru once in their lifetime, only once, and got free. In this case of a great soul. I mean, that combines Hatat Siddha and Swapna Siddha, doesn't it? You get free suddenly for no apparent reason. Or maybe because of a dream you had and you didn't really remember that dream until you saw Holy Mother at a train station. Hey, you were in my dream, you see. And you gave me a mantra. It was the most impressive dream of my life, and all of a sudden everything comes together, you see. So it's very beautiful instances in the life of the devotees. He says here, there is another class of devotee. So this happens not on the level of, necessarily on the level of people who are already spiritually adept or masters and so forth. These are devotees that are working on their spiritual life and sharpening their arrow. And God comes in the form of an enlightened soul, in the form of a dream, and gives them enlightenment. So here's something in the Vedantic tradition we can tell you about the importance of dreams, other than hurry up and awaken from them, as the Upanishads say in a non-dual sense. Use them to get awake. You're not the dream, you're the dreamer. That's a line out of a song of Ram Prasad Sen, the poet saint of Bengal. And also, "O dreamer, awake, you must, another line out of a song. So dreaming, the dream of finitude is how Lex Hixon described that. You're in a dream of finitude, but you don't know the reality of infinity. All dreams are finite because they're attended with the covering power of form, right? So blast through that form, see the formless essence that is yourself. That's the non-dual way of speaking. Well, I was talking about Sri Ramakrishna's sense of humor. Here's another one. How about asiddha? Not perfected even by accident. A very sorry class of beings. How does he say it? Like trying to drive a nail into a stone wall. There are many beings whose spiritual consciousness is not the least awakened, even though they hear about God 1,000 times. Alas. So, Krishna's way of teaching that is in the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter called The Division Between the Divine and the Demoniacal. He talks about the demoniacal not as if they don't have a soul or they don't have an Atman, that their soul is buried so deep under actions of negativity, sins, transgressions, evils that they've committed, that it will take an avatar's grace to come along and awaken them, if they should be so fortunate. So you have really a gamut of the meaning of siddha here, don't you? Perfection. You have that which comes by grace, you have that which comes by effort, you have that which comes in a dream, you have that which comes unexpectedly for reasons you don't know, and you have that which never comes. Beware of that last one, now that you've heard about it. Asiddha, non-perfection. Now, these two quotes to finish. One can gain spiritual perfection through both affirmation and negation. I'm repeating this. Blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God. This is the all-inclusive path of positive love and devotion, commingled with transcendent knowledge. In other words, in the practice of this comprehensive yoga, one of these will happen to you. Hopefully not this one, of course. X that one out. The final quote at the bottom of the page says, "Why shouldn't a man be able to realize the formless Brahman? He need only renounce the sense objects. Then he too will know this much about Brahman, that it exists." That's another good Advaita Vedanta Zen koan. You need to know that much about God, that it exists. Or put another way, it is existence. Because we exist, that means God is. And I am that. I and my Father are one. See? So that teaching is always headed towards a kind of perfection that's called in our tradition Advaita, non-duality. And it penetrates through what we call the curtain of nescience, or the cloud of unknowing, that binds people into Maya and into nature as being the only recourse. Speaking about songs in the tradition, so those ignorant souls, the asiddhas, if you want to call them that, they give themselves to the illusion of finitude. They think themselves born from nature, and then so forth. They concentrate on nature, and then they return to nature. So they give themselves to the illusion of death. By their own will, they do that. By their own design, they give themselves to death. And then an avatar comes along every once in a while and says, "But what about eternal life? I can give you eternal life." Through one of these methods, you see, you can get eternal life. You don't have to give yourself to the illusion of finitude or the illusion of death anymore. So that's a fortunate soul who receives the grace of an avatar. So a lot to be said about these great beings. I'm glad we're getting around to a series of classes about it. I think in the first class I mentioned the avatar, the divine incarnation, isn't always held in that high esteem by some souls, because they're always found working with the lowly and the fallen beings. So they think, oh, those beings must not be that high, because they're descending down into the depths of other levels of consciousness and helping beings. But that's the one Vivekananda says that the difference between compassion and love is that love rolls up its sleeves and gets busy. See? If you see that you're no different than me and you're suffering, then I must roll up my sleeves and help you, because you and I are the same being. That's love. Compassion can too often stand back and go, "Oh, that's really too bad. I'm sorry for you." Can I help you in any way? What do you know? You're suffering. How can you tell? Do you know what kind of help you need? So it has to be much more direct than that. So true love will see the removal of the distinction between God and nature, between mankind and spirit, between creature and creator. Remove the distinction between them and get busy and raise to the right stature. To that stature which we are. Now, in the remaining time, I was going to show you this new chart, which is quite a study in itself. This is the most recent chart. I fashioned it just last week and was able to make a beautiful copy of it here on the islands. That's more clear, and it has to do with that, what the avatar teaches in terms of progress towards freedom. Now, freedom is the key word in Vedanta and Buddhism. Freedom from all trammels, freedom from name and form, freedom from nature, freedom from bondage, freedom from dependence, freedom from ignorance, however you put it, that is the key word. It's called moksha. And the definition of moksha in my tradition is that which is always at hand. It is the eternal state of your being. It cannot be gained through sadhana. It's already yours. What you're doing when you practice sadhana is to remove the impurities of the mind so you can see that it's yours. So it's not something that's brought into being through time, freedom. It's not something that you get by purifying your senses or something. Because that would mean that you're creating freedom. But it's already, a given. Freedom is your true nature. It's the nature of the soul. So there's nothing you can think of that falls under the category of transformation, change, purification, evolution, that will define moksha. cannot be defined that way. It's a freedom already at hand, always at hand. It never had an inception, it will never have an end. And it's the only thing that puts an end to Maya. Nothing else will. They say Maya is eternal. The only time it ends is when the soul gets Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Otherwise, Maya will persist in some form, even Mahamaya, you see. But moksha will get rid of it. So those precious words from my tradition about moksha, or you can also call it mukti. They use that word mukti too. So progress towards true freedom, what does it look like? The first quote here by Vivekananda says, liberation, freedom, mukti is all my religion. And everything that tries to curb it, I will avoid by flight or fight. Freedom is the only condition of growth. Take that off, and the result is degeneration. So you can see how precious he considers the word freedom to be, which is probably why he passed away on July 4th, by the way. To give us a new slant and a new meaning on that kind of freedom that we thought of as political and so forth, generated by governments or something, which is quite disappointing when you see one government enslaves the people in another way when the past government is put out of the picture. So freedom never comes, does it, really? You only enjoy a little period of peace, but war is always coming back and taking the foreground. So the real peace and the real freedom, then, they say, is the peace that passes all understanding, and the freedom you get by getting free of bondage for all times. So that's why it says here, that's the only condition for growth. If you're trying to get freedom through any other mechanism, it's going to fail. That's what it means. True growth is based on freedom. And it's based on the existence of freedom, not creating freedom for yourself. It's very important to think about that when you do your sadhana. That's probably why Hatha Siddha happens. I think I'll think a little differently today about my meditation. Boom, all of a sudden, you got Hatha Siddha. All you needed was just a little shift of your mind to this new perspective, and that's it, you see. That's all I needed. I got sudden enlightenment. And you're running around the neighborhood telling people, free, I'm free. And they're calling the little white men in the white coats, you see. So these things all very much interconnected, but that change in thinking will be very beneficial to you. Now for this chart, you have to start at the bottom, at the black dot. It's just called tamas. That is, just rude ignorance. It's just dense. They call it tundra. You can see the word tundra, darkness. Sleep, ignorance. They call it here ignorance about what? Vital energy, meaning, selflessness, higher intelligence, and the soul. If you don't have those, that's ignorance. I mean, if you're ignorant of your prana, that's that's the first peg in the coffin of ignorance. You have to know about your energy. Tamas does not have energy. Tamas has slothfulness, laziness, complacency, prevarication, heedlessness, lethargy. How many other English words? We have a lot of words for that. Why don't we have words like moksha and mukti in the English language? We have a lot of words for lethargy and slothfulness. So if you're ignorant of your vital energy, then you're in tamas. And if you're ignorant of the meaning of things, you have no idea what the tree means, or your relationship means, or food means, you have no understanding whatsoever. So this is also called Bhranti. The arrow goes there. Bhranti, delusion. Bhranti. And the quote there for Vivekananda, let each one work out his or her own freedom. You must raise yourself out of darkness. And to do that, you would go to Tamo Rajas. Now it's more gray, not black. It's bandha, bondage. It relates to kamana, pleasure seeking. That's where you find the pleasure seeking problem. And ignorance related to Bhranti and delusion, as we said. It's bondage to what? Sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, brooding on all of the above. That's tamo rajas. It's also not a very peaceful condition to have your mind in. And its main linchpin, as they say, is kamana, that is pleasure seeking. All of those things, sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, are all around pleasure. And somebody even said that at the break to me. See, seeing the beauty in everything is a kind of pleasure. So you end up at 80 or 90 years old saying, isn't that a beautiful tree? But you've just spent 90 years looking at trees. And you're still attached to the beauty of a tree. See? And you never knew that the tree was empty. You didn't know that scientifically, and you didn't know that spiritually until quantum physics had to come along and tell you, guess what? You're not looking at a tree. You're looking at the appearance tree. It's vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second. How's that for a world? Sound like shifting sands to you? That's how Christ described it. So what about that awakening? I told people this morning at satsang, a lot of my best realizations came from harsh teachings that woke me up. Reading things and saying, that applies to me. Slap in the face teaching, that was the best thing to read and hear, and apply it to yourself. And that's how you get up and out of ignorance. Who else is going to do it for you? Somebody, your best friend, will come up and tell you that you're selfish, or your family going to tell you that? Usually not. Now, you go from that dot. I mean, I'd like to put a smiley face on each one of those dots for you, but it's not the nature of these teachings. You go from tamo rajas to rajas itself, which should really be red, but it's a black and white chart, so you see it's a lighter shade of gray, a lighter shade of pale. And it's mrisa, pretense and vanity. Its linchpin is kapata, deception. It's pretense and vanity around what? False attainment, assumed status, feigned authority, and the sense of superiority over others. That's pretty much the description of pride, or mrisa, they call it in Sanskrit. Its linchpin is deception. I'll get you the other teachings on the way. I just want to show you the main underlying foundations. Now remember, this is much like this chart, and it's much like this chart too. We're showing a kind of progress towards freedom, but we're doing it in terms of the dynamics of human emotion and human intelligence, rather than stations of philosophy, as this other chart was like, or just a simple rendering of how a soul makes gradated progress. This is put more in terms of actual human souls, personalities, as they march towards a higher freedom. The quote there under Rajas, those social skills, those social rules that stand in the way of freedom are injurious and should be done away with. So you can see there at the level of family and pretense and so forth, or false attainment. I am a professor, I am a scientist, it's my knowledge. This is mine. I am superior, my religion is better than others, and so forth and so on. You have that whole cross-section of impediment to the soul's moving forward. Spiritual ego would be there too. That is assumed status. I'm better than others. My religion is better than others. Then you go to Rajasattva. You're beginning to blend the red with the white, and it's coming out rather yellow. You see. So here's a little bit higher station. It's called Chaitanya, or spiritual awakening. Its linchpin is sadhana. It's ushering in what? Glimmerings of insight, intuition, aspiration, willingness to practice, and positivity. you can see the whole atmosphere change all of a sudden. Willingness means basically self-surrender, isn't it? I mean, you're surrendering up your impediments that you had held pretentiously at the last station of life. You're opening up. You're getting humble. You're considering your own wisdom nothing compared to the wisdom of God, wisdom of Divine Mother. And you're willing to learn. Then you get sattva at the top. That's mumukshutvam. It's not quite mukti or moksha yet, which that word mumukshutvam infers, but it's the desire to be free. You can see how hard the desire to be free is to earn. Freedom, that's really hard to earn, but just the desire to be free, they call that very hard to earn. So when a soul gets the sincere desire to be free, you'll see a change in them. And all of a sudden, it's like back here, the path of indifference, right? All of a sudden, they're indifferent to excitement, family, status, authority, pleasure-seeking, feelings, pastimes, so forth. They become indifferent to it. They want true freedom. This is an authentic desire for freedom, not a on-again, off-again desire for freedom that you see quite often in people. Its linchpin is prasana, clarity of mind. You have to be clear in order to get that true desire for liberation. Doesn't it sound a lot like certitude of non-duality back here? You know that that exists and you want it, so you're standing up for it in this lifetime. You're going to get it in this lifetime. There's no other thing that you prefer other than that. You're not going to take any second best, or like Swami Shardananda, I'll wait to see God in everything. If I can't have it now, I'll wait for it. It's the desire to be free involving what? Recognition of oneness of all things, the discrimination between the real and the unreal, detachment from the unreal, and willingness to practice sadhana that comes into bear there. Because back there in the pretentious level, you didn't need to practice. You were already great in your own mind. You were a legend in your own mind. You see. Nobody can tell me anything. I'm already a spiritual giant. You see. I know better than others. My religion is better than others. And so to rid yourself of that level of thinking and to arrive at the willingness to do practice and to open up is a major step in spiritual life. It has to do with clarity of mind. Let's go, and the quote there is, "There must be freedom of the individual to express his nature." These are all little quick quotes of Vivekananda that I put in there. May you speedily attain to freedom and then help others attain it. And advancement towards liberation is freedom. It's the worthiest gain of mankind. Those are quotes that I put in from Swami Vivekananda to show you how important that word freedom was to him. Now, please go back down to the lowest part of the chart on the right-hand side here. I want to show you how, in a way of the characterization, as I put down here, of this march towards higher freedom. It started out with Bhranti delusion, didn't it? But it was based on spriha, desire. These are this is the linchpins, but these are the sets of supporting qualities that support the linchpins, like in any good machine. So there'll be a supporter, and then there'll be the actual linchpin itself in these moving machines. So desire is there, spriha, it's called in Sanskrit. Bhranti, delusion, is there, and it's attended by lokayatika, materialism. So you can see pretty much in that level of dark tamas, this is a good definition, a threefold definition of what the soul is laboring under. If he steps up, then he begins to get out of tamas and gets a little rajas into it, a little activity, still quite frenetic. then the threesome there is pleasure seeking, and it's based on distraction, vikshepa, and also attended with sense enjoyment, apadika, alpadika. So you can see that, for instance, sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, and brooding are distractions. Vikshepa, they're distractions. You might have lived a great family life and had lots of fun. And later on you look back at it and say, boy, that was really a 20-year period where I didn't go anywhere. Guess what? It was like I ate a sweetmeat, it went down the throat, and I can't even remember what it tasted like anymore. All that laughter, all those good times, all that drinking, all that family stuff, all those games, everything I experienced in my family for 20 years. What did it amount to? In fact, it could have amounted to some very deep indentions in my consciousness called samskaras that are going to bring me back to family again next lifetime, because I want more of the same. The camel eats thorny bushes, even though his gums bleed, but he still goes on eating thorny bushes. And he comes back as a camel in his next lifetime to eat more thorny bushes. See? Is how Ramakrishna put it. So this distracted mind is a major hurdle in getting out of all forms of tamas. We think, oh, distraction and pastime, that sounds more like rajas, but really it's raja-tamas. And it's a hard hole to pull yourself out of. It doesn't look like a hole. I mean, think of it as multidimensional instead of one-dimensional. You'll see it's like you're sucked down this hole of that kind of life. Buddha wanted out of that, no doubt, and found a way out. And other avatars did too. The next level then, let's look at that threesome. That is mrisa, that kind of vanity, pretentiousness that's there in the soul. Quite that arrogance that's there in the Western soul that thinks since it's rich and opulent, that it's a better society than everywhere else, and that its fundamentalist religion is better than all others. And because it's, as my teacher said, your belief in God here in the West is based on the saying, pray to God, but keep the gunpowder dry. He saw right through us. Pray to God, but keep the gunpowder dry. Why do you need gunpowder if you're putting your faith in God? Why don't you go and help other nations, not dominate them? So this power of domination comes from pretentiousness, thinking yourself to be superior. Well, I mean, you can look at that teaching right away and just say, oh, Babaji, I don't quite get it, or I don't agree with it. But when you think about it and apply it on everything that's going on out there, on the world level, on the political level, on the business level, on the competitive level, you cannot deny that that's an occult power called domination over others. And we just looked at the occult powers here. We just looked at them, how a person works up through them and must be free of them. So, based on deception, isn't it? Kapata, you're deceived. You're deceiving yourself into thinking you're greater than others and so forth. What are the underlying linchpins to that main pin? It's all Vedana Moha, emotionalism. See, people get very emotional in their families. They get very emotional in society. They get very emotional in the military. They get very emotional here and there, and it ends up in Tamil Rajasic action that hurts others. Violence. Unthought violence. Like Dalai Lama writing to President Bush when 9/11 happened. Don't react. Letter came to the White House from Dalai Lama. He can speak from experience. He's not just some spiritual person out there. He's had his country ruined by war. So a letter comes. He says, oh, don't go to war and eye for eye, tooth for tooth kind of thing, because you'll hurt innocence. You'll create more karma. There's enough karma now, let's just work that out first, you see. Stay yourself a little bit. No, wouldn't listen to it. No. Is it because he was a bad person? Well, it's probably because war makes money. It's not like these people are fools. They're probably outthinking you by a long ways, in their cleverness. And you're still thinking back there in the moral level, oh, it's not right to do that, it's not right to do that. It's naive. What's not right has been happening to the world ever since it was incepted. And it will not stop happening to the world because the world is unreal. So you haven't renounced it. That's why people give it up, is because they're waiting for some change that's never going to happen because the whole thing is change. You can't build your house on that kind of sand. You have to build it on bedrock. So you can look at it and slice it any way you want, on any level of existence, from worldly to intellectual to religious. But when you get beyond religion, you start awakening. And you start being less naive. You get clarity of mind, you see. That's the next step, isn't it? It involves clarity of mind. Now you see why everyone's doing everything. The evil, the good, and the transcendent. You see, the spiritual beings. You see why they're doing everything. You see the whys and wherefores. There's that teaching on the 5 W's that we give. Why, where, what, when, and who. Why is cause and effect, where is space, when is time, what is objects, name and form. But who is the greatest question of all, because you're asking, who am I? You're finding out that I'm really a sentient soul, I'm not matter. So you can say those 4 W questions, are they worthless? Not if you take them and put them in a spiritual setting. Then you're asking, where was the soul incepted? What is the soul? When did it come about? See? Now the 4 W's all of a sudden take on a huge teaching, don't they? Thank you to my wife for informing me about that teaching. The 5 W's are, in one context, the 4 of them are very potentially demeaning and circular. They call it circular thinking. They don't lead you out. But when you put them in the spiritual context, they all become very powerful allies for your trip out of freedom. Don't forget that kapata is not only accompanied by emotionalism, as I was talking about just now. People get very emotional and do unthought things, unseemly things, in the military, in business, in the world, in families. It's happening all the time. Holy Mother had to put up with it in her family, of all things. It's also accompanied by udasina, indifference. Indifference to wisdom, indifference to teachings, indifference to your family, that is, their feelings, their needs, indifference to the path of liberation that beings are following one way or another. So that's a kind of negative indifference that is there in the sense, in the insensitive being, let's put it that way. And the next level, that trio had to do with spiritual awakening, is based on self-effort, sadhana. Now it's attended by alochana. Alochana means deep thinking. And it's also attended on the other side by upalabdhi, perception. So you can see how spiritual awakening has those 3. You get sadhana and self-effort, and you start thinking deeply about things, and you perceive. From deep thinking comes perception. Upalabdhi. It's a very beautiful teaching, and when it happens to you, you find yourself smack dab in the middle of the Dharma, the realm of the Dharma. That's known for deep thinking and perception. The Buddhists will tell you that, so the Vedantists. Oh, guess what? You're in the middle of the higher rungs of Dharma right now, when you're thinking about things and you're getting direct perception of how things work. You're the Sherlock Holmes of the spiritual world. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. See. And it's happening just like that, one after the other, you see. Just like atoms of knowledge are getting released and imploded in your mind. And you're on the trail. The game's afoot, and the game is about to end too. Let's see what that's like. You get to sattva and you have a desire to be free from all games, even the game of knowledge and ignorance. And that's attended by this threesome. Adhigama, that is basically the main foundation is, as we said, prasana, clarity of mind. You get clarity of mind. That's akin to khyati and dharma mega, rain cloud of virtues. In Buddhism and in yoga, both Buddha and Patanjali made that connection of dharma mega samadhi, the attainment of virtues that come forth like a natural rain cloud when you reach a certain level of perception, if you want to put it that way. So basically, that's true attainment, adhigama. And adhigama also refers to qualification. You're really qualifying yourself for Brahman. You're qualifying yourself for a life lived in Brahman. It's also attended on this other side by niskampana, stability. Sthiti samadhi, samadhi, yes, but sthiti pragnasya, as we were talking about this morning in satsang, stability. You are rock solid. You're like Shiva. See, you're solid in your realization. You can sit solidly. You can think solidly. You can not think solidly if you want to. And you can remove the solidity from objects. Everything is stable. So you've attained that very cherished level of attainment by the seers, they call stability. Or if you want to call it this way, non-change, non-transformation. You've escaped the appearance of changefulness all the time. They call it immutability. It's a nice English word. Mutability is change, immutability is non-change. So you've attained that. Now, the only thing we haven't addressed in this chart in the remaining 5 minutes of our class here is how it all culminates in moksha, perpetual freedom. That's the word I started off when we entered into this chart about 25 minutes ago. It's perpetual freedom. It's a good word in English again, perpetual, because it infers that, it never had a beginning or end. It's just always there. Already at hand, as I said. That's how I defined it. Moksha, already at hand, perpetual freedom. And see how it's associated with ananda, bliss. That's why they give bliss one of the highest reckonings. That's why the last name of thousands of beings on earth today is Ananda. This Ananda, that Ananda, and so forth. So, they haven't taken that name for no good purpose. And you can see the other little hidden teaching up there. It's based in samasti chitta, universal mind. You see here? You've become a spiritual master, and you'll soon be a past master. You've got the universal idea, the open, free mind, which I was saying you will find written in spades in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna if you read it. That beautiful testament to spirituality, all about this universal-minded avatar. And that's a good place to end. We end the chart there. I think we've done all the quotes, and we've looked at the characters' additions, and we've seen how a person works out of the three gunas, which is why I really didn't spend a lot of time there, did I? See, I think it was somewhere up here. It goes beyond the three gunas. There. At the Asam Shakti level, transcends the three gunas. So that would be a good flash forward to this chart and its dots, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, if you were doing it in a color coding. From deep, dark tamas to tamas blended a little bit with restlessness, to restlessness itself, to the combination of restlessness turning towards higher things, and then to sattva itself. And Shankara avers that there's even something beyond sattva called pure sattva, which has to do with study of the scriptures, meditation, and those spiritual practices that were a part of your sadhana. That's a pure sattvic state that's beyond this kind of sattva. So we've looked at the avatar's path to freedom out of ignorance and all the levels of the phases of the soul and relativity in 3 charts within the last 6 hours. That is 3 hours this week and 3 hours last week. And we'll conclude next week with some teachings and songs about the avatar and its nature and the Advaita of the avatar. Basically, we'll zone in more on the non-dual position that the avatar holds that makes all of this possible for them, and that has rolled it out like a carpet for us. 24 cosmic principle carpet. Cosmology connected to philosophy, connected to spirituality. So that's all the doing of this one supreme soul, called by Krishna, the name Krishna by the Vaishnavas, Shiva by the Saivites, Kali or Durga by the Shaktas, and Brahman by the Advaitists. That one supreme being whose essence lies in all things and all beings. So let's end here with a chant then and move towards next Sunday's class and next Sunday morning satsang. Om Sato Ma Satgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Brichorma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Gopi Madhura, Nila Madhura, Yuktam Madhura, Guptam Madhura, Krishtam Madhura, Sheshtam Madhura, Madhura Dipate Rakila Madhura. Gopa Madhura, Dhamo Madhura, Ashtir Madhura, Shristi Madhura, Kalitam Madhura, Kalitam Madhura, Madhura Dipate Rakila Madhura, Madhura Dipate Rakila Madhura, Madhura Dipate Akila Madhura.